is NBC Nightly News. Saturday, March 10th, with Carol Simpson substituting for John Hart and Dick Schaff with sports from the NBC News Center in New York.
Good evening. President Carter arrived in Israel tonight carrying Egyptian counter-proposals in an effort to solve the remaining differences between Egypt and Israel. Mr. Carter told Israeli leaders that he was carrying what he felt could be the final details of a peace treaty. Before going to Israel, Mr. Carter addressed the Egyptian parliament and had a final meeting with President Sadat. After the meeting, Mr. Carter said he hoped that the remaining difficulties could be resolved. We have two reports from our White House correspondents, John Dancy in Israel and Judy Woodruff in Cairo.
Despite Mr. Carter's well-known preference for private diplomacy, Mr. Sadat has insisted they get maximum public exposure during his stay here. Today, they motorcaded once again through downtown Cairo. The Egyptians apparently got their way when it came to planning Mr. Carter's schedule, but the peace negotiations may have been another matter. In a speech to the Egyptian assembly, Mr. Carter seemed to be trying to break some bad news gently, that the people here should not expect the peace treaty to contain the specific commitment they want to the future of the Palestinians. He urged them to support the treaty anyway, and he offered his personal commitment as an incentive.
I pledge to you today that I also remain personally committed to move on to negotiations concerning the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and other issues of concern to the Palestinians and to future negotiations.
The president also urged other Arab states to go along with the Camp David agreements. For them to expect any more concessions from the Israelis right now, he suggested, is just not realistic.
Let no one be deceived. The effect of their warlike slogans and their rhetoric is to make them, in reality, advocates of the status quo, not change, advocates of war, not peace.
As another incentive, the president suggested that American aid will be available to help Mr. Sadat meet his commitment to this country's defense and its ailing economy.
My government, for its part, the full power and influence of the United States of America, is ready to share that burden of that commitment with you.
The leaders held one more negotiating session amidst reports that the talks have made some encouraging progress. But in their public statements afterwards, both of them kept their assessments guarded.
We have resolved some difficult issues here. Difficult issues still remain to be resolved.
We had a very fruitful talk. As exactly President Carter stated, we have overcome some of the difficulties. Some other issues are to be settled. And we wish to President Carter and Mrs. Carter all the best wishes and fulfillment and achievement in his visit to Israel.
Tonight, when Mr. Carter left Cairo, reporters still didn't know how much the Egyptians are insisting on modifying the agreements reached in Washington between Mr. Carter and Prime Minister Begin.
The key question at this stage of the negotiations is whether the changes proposed by the Egyptians will be acceptable to the Israelis, while American officials caution that nothing will be settled until they've talked to the Israelis. The statements made here seem to indicate that the Egyptian proposals did not present insurmountable obstacles. Judy Woodruff, NBC News, Cairo.
President Carter arrived in Israel to an enthusiastic kiss from Prime Minister Begin. It seemed to bode well for the talks here, and the mood was definitely upbeat. However, U.S. officials cautioned reporters that the unresolved issues are real ones. But President Carter, in his arrival statement, put the talks in the most hopeful light yet.
During the last 3 days, I have spent many hours discussing with President Sadat what could be the final details of a treaty of peace. I have good reason to hope that the goal can now be reached. But of course, the ultimate choice lies where those choices have always lain, with the chosen representatives of the people who have suffered directly from so many years of destruction and bloodshed. I look forward to completing the urgent business at hand on this brief visit.
I have good reason to hope the goal can now be reached, a phrase that seemed to mean an agreement is so close it can be accomplished on this trip. But Mr. Carter's mission is not universally admired in Israel. Right-wing demonstrators greeted him at several points along his motorcade to Jerusalem, and at one point, an egg sailed out of the crowd and hit his car. Tonight, the President and Mrs. Carter had dinner with Prime Minister and Mrs. Begin, the beginning of the talks. Afterward, it was announced that the two delegations will meet tomorrow morning. It's understood the remaining unresolved issues are still the question of linkage and whether Egypt's treaty obligations with its Arab neighbors take precedence over a treaty with Israel. The United States has suggested language to bridge those differences. Egypt has asked for changes in the language, clarifications. President Carter must now find out whether Prime Minister Begin will accept those changes. No one here can be certain that he will. As one official put it, one man's clarification is another man's distortion. John Dansley, NBC News, with President Carter in Jerusalem.
After the first Carter-Begin meeting, an Israeli spokesman described the talks as frank. That was the only official comment on the meeting. There had been reports that President Carter might return to Egypt after concluding his talks with Prime Minister Begin, but White House Press Secretary Jody Powell said Mr. Carter will be returning to Washington from Israel. However, Secretary of State Vance is expected to go to Cairo on Tuesday. For what reason? It's not known. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the Palestinian Liberation Organization rejected President Carter's offer to the Palestinians to join the Mideast peace talks. The PLO charged that Mr. Carter was not sincere and added the PLO would continue to resist what it called surrender solutions. Earlier today, 4 Palestinians were killed by Israeli troops as they tried to cross the Jordan River, reportedly to carry out a terrorist attack. Here's Rick Davis.
The bodies of these 4 men were on display this morning at a paratrooper camp in Israel. The soldiers say these were terrorists trying to infiltrate Israel from Jordan last night. They were well armed with Soviet-made automatic weapons, a grenade launcher, and the grenades. We weren't allowed to take any pictures of this camp, but it's located about 2.5 miles from the Jordan River on the West Bank, the dividing line between Jordan and Israel. The soldiers say their command car was fired on from the fields at about midnight. They fired back. 1 terrorist was killed. A lieutenant describes what happened next.
We began to go inside the field, and suddenly 4 meters before us, one of the terrorists rose up from the ground, and immediately all of us opened fire, and then we saw that 3 of the terrorists were killed.
Literature taken from the bodies tells of a plan to capture 10 Israelis and hold them as hostages until 10 other terrorists held in jails here were released. Security precautions have increased greatly in Israel, reaching a peak today. Barricades were up on all the roads entering Jerusalem. Every vehicle driven by an Arab coming into Jerusalem was searched. The Israelis expected an increase in terrorist activity with the visit of President Carter, and because there is a fear among Palestinians that their cause will be ignored in any peace treaty. Rick Davis, NBC News, Jerusalem.
While President Carter was trying to mediate the differences between Egypt and Israel, another Mideast country was accusing the U.S. of military aggression and intervention. The Soviet-backed government of South Yemen issued the strong denunciation after President Carter approved the speed-up of sales of tanks and warplanes to North Yemen. The administration's move is apparently designed to help protect the security of Saudi Arabia.
What happened?
We lost all our traveler's checks.
Don't worry, I called the American Express.
Oh, they weren't American Express.
Most people carry American Express. Let me think.
Look, make sure you ask for American Express traveler's checks by name. Don't leave home without them.
That's Kathy Willis. She teaches at our school. I bet she's worried now about that problem dandruff of hers. I wish she'd ask me.
Mr. Owens, which shampoo do you think?
Ever tried Tegrin?
Does it really work?
Well, in a national survey, 3 out of 4 dermatologists judge the medicated ingredient Integrin effective in fighting even problem dandruff.
I'll give it a test.
How's that dandruff problem?
I'll give Tegrin an A+, Mr. Owens.
Prove it to yourself. Tegrin works.
For years, car rental companies have been shouting about who's number one. Budget Rent-A-Car believes that in the service business, there's only one number one. You, the customer. The customer being served should always feel more important than the people doing the serving. Budgets, numbers of people, numbers of cars, numbers of locations, even their great rates, only count if you feel.
At Budget, you're number one.
Senate Minority Leader Howard Baker said today he supports a constitutional amendment to require a balanced federal budget. Baker said if the Senate doesn't pass such an amendment, he would be in favor of a constitutional convention. Senator Baker is at a Midwest Republican leadership conference along with other GOP presidential hopefuls. Bob Kerr reports.
When Republicans sell buttons boasting that they have 10 candidates better than Jimmy Carter, it means they don't think much of the president's chances for re-election. If former Treasury Secretary John Connally, Senators Bob Dole and Howard Baker, Congressman Jack Kemp and Philip Crane, and former CIA Director George Bush, if they all didn't believe President Carter was in serious political trouble, they would not be out campaigning this early. Today, without Ronald Reagan, who sent a telegram, they told Midwest Republican leaders that a weak, inept Carter presidency is giving Republicans their best chance to recapture the White House since 1952.
The country's singing our song. The country's saying we've had enough of spending in massive amounts beyond the resources of the government of the United States. We've had enough of deficit financing. We've had enough of inflation that is the ravage and the scourge of every person in this nation. And we want fiscal sanity in this nation.
Let me simply say to you that the Soviets are filling a vacuum because of the lack of leadership, because of the lack of a coherent, constant, consistent program that we're prepared to defend.
And George Bush joked about President Carter meeting with a group of investors.
Trying to stir them up, he said, well, you know, if I weren't president of the United States, I'd be investing heavily in the stock market. One of them spoke up and he said, if you weren't president of the United States, I'd be investing heavily in the stock market, you know.
The Republican message from this State of the Nation conference is clear and confident. Republicans believe that even if President Carter gets a peace treaty in the Middle East, it won't be enough to assure him a second term in the White House. Bob Kerr, NBC News, Indianapolis.
The Space Shuttle Columbia, the first in a new breed of spacecraft which can be flown into space and back to Earth many times, is having some problems. It was supposed to have left Edwards Air Force Base in California this week, riding piggyback on its mothership for Cape Canaveral, Florida, where it will be launched. But trouble developed yesterday during a test flight. Here's Heidi Schulman.
A test flight of the space shuttle was delayed for more than 6 hours yesterday when NASA engineers had trouble mating the Columbia with its 747 mothership. One of the bolts which hold the aircraft together was misaligned. After its shakedown cruise, the shuttle was supposed to begin a 2-day flight to the launch site at Cape Canaveral. But during 17 minutes in the air, long strips of insulating tape and styrofoam tiles ripped loose from Columbia's frame. When it landed in the California desert, there were holes along the tail and beneath the cockpit. The foam was a substitute for permanent ceramic tiles, which will shield the spacecraft from intense heat as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. Temperatures up to 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit. As the foam tore off, the flapping tape damaged some of the permanent tiles already in place. So the Columbia is grounded for the weekend while engineers study what went wrong. It probably won't be ready for its piggyback trip across the country until sometime after Monday. Heidi Schulman, NBC News, Los Angeles.
There was violence in the streets of Tehran today as women protesting the orders of the Ayatollah Khomeini were attacked by the men who support his rule. Tens of thousands of women walked off their jobs in defiance of the Ayatollah's ban on Western-style clothes. As they marched in protest, male revolutionaries fired rifles, waved knives, and threw stones at them. At least one woman was stabbed, several others were injured. Vietnam today accused Chinese troops of continuing to make what it calls nibbling attacks on Vietnamese territory. Hanoi radio said China is showing a reluctance to withdraw across the border. This film of Vietnam was released by East German television. It shows the return of Vietnamese troops to Long Son province, scene of the worst battle in the 3 weeks of fighting between China and Vietnam. Long Son City, which used to be one of the most beautiful towns in northeast Vietnam, is deserted. Hanoi radio claims that withdrawing Chinese troops destroyed almost all houses, hospitals, and schools in the city.
Prices are going crazy, but we're still crazy about steak. Maybe inflation means we can't have fancy cuts for a while. A1 steak sauce means we can still enjoy steak. A1 isn't expensive, but its herbs and spices blend with the natural juices of steak to give any cut an expensive taste. We aren't eating sirloin this week.
Well, we are eating steak.
And A1 steak sauce makes every bite count.
You know me as Mr. Goodwrench, the professional mechanic who cares about your GM car. But your participating GM dealer also has a Mr. Goodwrench who cares at the service write-up desk and in the parts department. We're all over the service department, just to be sure your GM car gets Mr. Goodwrench professional care.
You never had it so good.
Keep that great GM feeling
With Mr. Goodwrench.
That's us.
And genuine GM parts.
Wake up to the secret of new Night of Olay.
Good morning. You know, a good night's sleep is one of my best beauty secrets. This is another. Night of Olay, an incredible new night cream that eases dryness while you sleep. So light and non-greasy, even your husband won't know it's there until you wake up with softer, smoother, younger-looking skin.
New Night of Olay. Wake up to the secret of younger-looking skin.
And now for the news in sports, here's Dick Schaap. Dick?
The field in the National Collegiate Basketball Championships has dwindled from 40 teams to 24, and the favorites, North Carolina, UCLA, Notre Dame, and Indiana State, have not yet played. San Francisco established itself today as a long-shot contender, beating Brigham Young by 23 points. 7-foot center Bill Cartwright scored 24 points for San Francisco. Rutgers' big man, James Bailey, isn't that big, but at 6'9", Bailey can do much more than score. Bailey also can block shots, and as he demonstrates here in the closing minutes of a 6-point victory over favored Georgetown, he can rebound. In other second-round games today, Louisville, Marquette, and Louisiana State, all ranked among the country's top 20, all won, as expected, against unranked opponents. Syracuse, another top 20 team, won, but Texas and Iowa, both ranked and both favored, were both upset by Oklahoma and Toledo. Surprising Toledo represents the Mid-American Conference, which has come up with surprises before. The conference produced, for instance, the little-known superstar who, for the second straight year, is leading the National Basketball Association in scoring. George Gervin sort of snuck up on the NBA. He got there via Eastern Michigan University and the ABA quietly, with very little fanfare.
You know, now I'm here in a man's world. Wow, it's still a great feeling to me, and just great to be, among some of the best.
Gervin is the NBA's best at scoring, almost 30 points a game. New Jersey coach Kevin Lockery is one of his fans.
He's the best shooter I've seen in professional basketball in a long time.
He doesn't concern himself about passing. He doesn't have to. And why should he, the way he could shoot?
Gervin's coach, Doug Moe, offers him the ultimate compliment.
So he's free to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants.
When you're a guard and 6'7" as Gervin is, you can do what you want, says the man who used to lead the NBA in scoring, Bob McAdoo.
How can you stop a guy 6'7", when everybody else is playing him is like 6'2", 6'3". I know I'd have a field day if guys 6'2" or 6'3" would guard me every game.
You'd like that?
Oh, yeah. It'd be easier for the body, too. You don't have to bump and bruise with all the big guys under the basket.
Gervin has more than his height going for him, and he does know what it's like to get pounded on the court. Teammate Mike Gale, a defensive specialist, beats on him in practice.
I just try my best in practice playing against them to probably try and hold him and push him and shove him and everything.
How do you stop George Gervin?
Well, you got a gun?
Gervin's nickname, incidentally, is the Iceman for his coolness. His young son is called, of course, the Ice Cube. A pair of boxers, one who is a champion and one who wants to be, called off their opponents this afternoon. The featherweight champion, Danny Little Red Lopez, needed only a round and a half before he knocked out his unbeaten challenger, Roberto Castanon of Spain. It was the 6th successful defense of his World Boxing Council title for Lopez. The best-known inmate of Rahway State Prison, James Scott, continued his quest for Mike Rossman's light heavyweight championship by stopping Richie Cates in the 10th round. Scott's 14th victory in 15 fights. He has drawn once, delighted the prison crowd. Scott's next fight in his usual prison setting will be against Yaki Lopez, and if he wins that one, Rossman could be next. Carol?
Thank you, Dick. And we'll be back with more news after these messages.
My idea of sexy is a fresh feeling against my bare skin and a fresh-looking mouth color, just as sexy. That's the look and feel of Natural Wonder New Fresh All-Day Lipstick. Never dry, never cakey. My lips feel fresh, wet, and wonderful.
Light up your looks in a whole new natural way with Natural Wonder Fresh All-Day Lipstick.
Wonderful.
Hey, what are you feeding that puppy?
Dry puppy food.
Oh, ain't you got no feelings?
I'm a very sensitive person.
Why don't you feed him a moist puppy food with meat, like Gaines Puppy Choice?
Doesn't dry puppy food have meat?
Oh, no. The Gaines Puppy Choice has meat byproducts and real meat. Puppies love it. And it's easy to digest.
How about giving us some of that?
Well,
Ain't you got no feelings?
Gaines Puppy Choice, the meaty food for your puppy to grow on.
Ever since 1915, when General first started making quality tires, we've believed in quality service too, for cars as well as tires. So when you need brakes, an alignment, or most any service, you get name brand replacement parts, professionally installed at a fair price. For quality in tires and service, talk to the people at General. They're the same good men they've always been.
Sooner or later, you'll own Generals.
Salmon fishing in the United States may be in trouble. There just aren't as many salmon as there used to be. So a group of California fishermen have decided to do something about it. Don Oliver has that story.
76 and 77 were drought years on the West Coast, years when the rivers only trickled. Many salmon were unable to reach their spawning grounds. In recent times, other activities of man have muddied the waters, generally reducing the number of salmon hatched every year.
One study showed that streams that used to have 45 to 50 salmon per mile in the 1960s had only 11 salmon per mile by 1978. Not only that, but the salmon in the ocean are said to be smaller now, less hardy, not as able to fight their way back upstream to spawn.
What about the fish hatcheries? They haven't been able to take up the slack. Something had to be done. Almost all involved recognized that. But commercial salmon fishermen didn't want their season cut.
And it's just not feasible to stay in business and cut down fishing time.
Those who charter boats for sports fishing said they wouldn't get customers if the limit of salmon was reduced. It was a distraught group of boaters and fishermen who met in Eureka, California to seek a solution, but one that would save their jobs.
but we know that we are losing our fish, and so we've got to act.
An angry session was expected, but it didn't happen. They swallowed hard and compromised.
The final vote is 2 noes and 10 yeses.
2 salmon per person on sports boats and a slightly shortened season for commercial fishermen. If the experts are right, it should mean thousands more salmon will live long enough to spawn. It will mean the price of salmon probably will go up. That is not good news, but without the new controls, it is possible that in a few years, the only salmon to be found on the West Coast would be in aquariums. Don Oliver, NBC News, Eureka, California.
Finally, before leaving Cairo to continue his Mideast peace mission in Israel, President Carter went sightseeing like any other tourist in Egypt. David Burrington has that report.
They were built 5,000 years ago, literally at the dawn of history. The old pharaohs figured they could cheat fate by getting themselves installed inside, and to this day nobody's figured out how they managed to pile up the big blocks. Long ago, the pyramids were declared the seventh wonder of the world, and Mr. Carter is rumored to have muttered today that to get a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel will be the eighth wonder. But the pyramids have seen so many people come and go that almost nothing except the pyramids seems very permanent. As Carter and Sadat lost sleep trying to wind up what seems like an endless conflict of 30 years, the pyramids and the Sphinx could testify that few of man's high hopes have lasted very long. They've watched scores of empires and dynasties collapse, the dreams of sultans, pashas, and caliphs crumble.
After the Sphinx was built in the image of the king, did they worship the Sphinx as a god?
Even the lofty role of the Sphinx itself now seems rather ridiculous. So the pyramid visit may have been rather sobering for the two presidents. Even if they manage to patch together a treaty, it'll only be worth an initial skeptical footnote in the long view of history as seen from here. But there are epic overtones. The Egyptians and the Israelis are the only people left from the old days. The rest of us are newcomers. So to get them working together after all these years would seem to be worth some kind of special honorable mention in the long perspective from this pile of stones. David Burrington, NBC News, Cairo.
And that's our report for this evening. Jessica Savage will be here tomorrow. I'm Carol Simpson. For NBC News, thank you and good night.
Last week I bought everything. I started with bologna, salami, egg salad, and ended with indigestion.
Pepto-Bismol.
Relief.
I'm not sure what did it, the 2-alarm fire or Mario's 3-alarm meatballs. But last night I woke up with a 4-alarm case of indigestion. Pepto-Bismol. Relief.
Pepto-Bismol coats, soothes, relieves. When you work or play too hard, pain can grip you as muscle aches. Break the grip of pain with Bengay. When minor arthritis pain flares up, even simple tasks can be painful chores. Break the grip of pain with Bengay. Bengay's fast, temporary relief breaks up nagging pain and its stiffness where it lives deep down in your muscles and joints. That's why Bengay is America's #1 selling pain relief rub. So when pain has you in its grip, break the grip of pain with Bengay.
Senator Richard Stone from Florida and Representative Paul Findley of Illinois will discuss the Middle East tomorrow on Meet the Press.
On Chips, Ponch and John mount trail bikes to patrol a hillside area invaded by reckless dirt bikers. Then BJ's hauling a pretty gal, a Count Dracula look-alike, and 2 coffins, and bears up a tree. Chips, BJ and the Bear, The Rockford Files, tonight starting at 8, 7 Central and Mountain Time on NBC.
Want to see some movie magic? Angie Dickinson in a Hollywood soundstage. Angie Dickinson in a penthouse apartment. Terrific, isn't it? But there's one thing the TV camera can't fake, and that's your smile. So when the camera moves in really close, my teeth have to be their whitest. How do I do it? With Pepsodent. It gets my teeth their whitest, but it's